Tom Maddrey, thank you for joining the Outspoken Artist. How you been? It's been a couple of months since we talked, even though it feels like it was just a week.
I've been doing great. We've been incredibly busy. Just got back from a week in Tucson at the NAMPA Summit, which was wonderful. Spending so much time with the members out there, and really looking forward to the rest of the year.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning me that summit, you and Melanie, and before I met Melanie and met you, I really didn't know much about the ASMP. Now, of course, now fast forward, there's a lot within the ASMP, the American Society of Media Photographers, for those that don't know the acronym. And it's fascinating how much behind the scene work the organization does to help photographers that I think goes unnoticed. Would you be able to tell me a little bit about the ASMP, what it isn't, and what a lot of people could benefit from learning more or being a part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, ASMP, as you mentioned, the American Society of Media Photographers, has been around now for 80 years. It's our 80th anniversary this year. So, since 1944, December 1944, the organization has been the leading voice for photographers' rights, especially professional photographers' rights. And in that time, ASMP has been involved in almost every major court case that deals with photography, and worked with Congress to help get a number of laws and legislative activities passed. And that, in a nutshell, is one half of what ASMP does. It's what we call our advocacy side. So, whether you're a member or not, ASMP fights for you as a content creator, as a visual artist, as an image maker, as a filmmaker. No matter what you do on the visual side of creativity, ASMP is out there fighting for you in the courts, in Congress, in state legislatures, making sure that you're able to have a living, right? Now, the other half of what we do is help individual photographers and videographers and content creators um, ensure that their businesses, their careers are moving in the right direction. We do this in a lot of different ways. We have a number of business and legal resources on our website that are custom designed for photographers. We have weekly legal clinics that members can sign up for, and a whole host of other benefits that are designed to support you as a photographer. And I think it's important to realize the role that ASMP plays. We're a trade association, which means that we work on behalf of our members and we work on behalf of the industry that our members are a part of. And so those are kind of our dual mandates, and we fulfill those in the two ways that I mentioned.
Wow. And you've been a member for a little shy of over what, 25 years
Yeah,
within the
yeah. So
ASMP?
yeah, I became an ASMP member when I was in 10th grade in high school,
Wow.
and I heard about ASMP from my photo teacher there here in Dallas, where I am, and became a member then, and was a student member through my time in photography school, and then in my time as a professional photographer was always a member of ASMP, and so it's a big full circle moment for me to lead this organization now, and I'm really excited about it.
So you mentioned a student member. And what is that? How does that help a student, whether in high school or college? What are they? What are they able to obtain from being a member of the ASMP as a student?
Yeah, you know, I think that ASMP obviously benefits professionals, emerging professionals, those who are at every stage of their career. But probably the group who can benefit the most from membership in ASMP are students. Because if you are a student and you're passionate about visual image making, filmmaking, content creation, whatever it is on this side of the world that you're passionate about, you can only fulfill those passions if you're able to make a living at it, right? And what ASMP offers is a path to help you go from where you're sitting as a student to a career that hopefully you're happy with, and can fulfill you creatively and allow you to pay the rent. That's the goal. And we have special programs for students. In addition to having the single lowest price for student membership of any organization, any of our peer organizations, we're at $25 a year for students. Um, Everyone who's a student who has an interest in any of the things we've talked about should be a member of ASMP. You get access to almost all of ASMP's benefits and videos and hundreds of hours of content and downloadable templates and everything else. And there's a special course over in our academy, which is called Path to the Profession, where we kind of lay out step by step what it takes to get your business started and what you need to be thinking about as a photographer. So we love our student members, and we're always rolling out new things for the student population.
I think it's fascinating that you started as a student member so many years ago, and now you are the CEO of the ASMP. Can you tell me from then till now, what has that journey been like?
Yeah, for me, it was a lot of twists and turns, as it is for so many people. So after I left, graduated from high school, I spent a couple years in college in New Orleans, doing non-photography related things, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, like so many of that age. And I ended up being accepted at and moving out to Santa Barbara, California, to attend the Brooks Institute of Photography. And it was at Brooks that, I was really able for the first time to allow my passion for photography to really, really flourish. And my time at Brooks, I really did appreciate it. What I always say is I left Brooks feeling that there wasn't anything anyone could ask me to photograph that I couldn't figure out how to do. I had all the skill sets and the tools, and even if I'd never done it before, I could figure it out. And that's, I think, the biggest part of what an education offers you, no matter what field you're in. The confidence and the ability to say, you know what, this is a problem I can tackle, even if it's one you haven't seen before. After Brooks, I moved back to Dallas, and I opened an art gallery with two people who I went to Brooks with as well, and we worked, and I built a photography business. Now, my photography business at that time was what we would generally now call editorial photography. So I made money by taking pictures and selling them to magazines and other outlets. Back when I was a photographer, stock photography was still a viable market and could be a pillar of one's business. But always what I was doing on the side was working with photographers and helping photographers learn the things that I had learned at Brooks, especially on the business side, and things that maybe they hadn't been exposed to before. And what I realized pretty quickly is that my skills were more suited towards teaching and supporting photographers than they were in being a photographer myself. So while I was a professional photographer for a little more than a decade, my focus and my passion was always on helping photographers. And I had started a business around that time called the Eclipse Photography Institute, and we made DVDs, if you remember those.
Oh yeah.
And they were sold in about 600 stores around the world. And they
Wow.
had all different topics about, one was about marketing, and one was about, color management and modern portraiture and things like that. Um, and after leaving that company and selling that company, I was kind of faced with a crossroads in my life, and I looked at what my options were, and I realized my next best step was to go to law school, to be a lawyer that works with photographers, and so that's what I did. And after I graduated from law school, I opened a firm here in Dallas, Texas, where we represented all artists, and not just visual artists. Even we represented musicians, and we represented galleries and creators. But our biggest client base were the individual artists themselves. And one of my first clients after I opened my firm was ASMP. And so ASMP was a client of mine for a number of years before um, I recognized that there was an opportunity at ASMP to come in as their general counsel and then later their chief legal officer and head of national content and education. And that was a role that I had for a number of years before taking over the CEO role in December. So that's a little bit about my path there from high school to ASMP.
No, that's great. That's really great. I'm intrigued during that time period where you were doing photography. You mentioned an art gallery. What is that like? What is it like to have an art gallery, and what is the undertakings to run something like that? At least back then, I don't know what it's like now.
Yeah, what we focused on were images that were artistic in nature but had a commercial bent to them. And what I mean by that is many of the people who would come into our gallery and our gallery openings would be hotels and hospitals and places where they'd say, you know what, we love these images. Can you make 300 of them for us that we can put around the country, right? So we were what we'd consider a commercial art gallery. And that's always been kind of the bent of my business was not on the fine art side, and I certainly respect fine artists. That is a level of creativity that I just simply don't possess. But what I was able to do was go out into the world and create imagery that both individuals and businesses wanted to purchase. And so, we had a gallery space here in Dallas. It's called the Blue Square Art Gallery, and we had openings every few months of different shows. We brought in artists from around the area and around the country, and it was a very enjoyable side project that I worked on with my two compatriots there while we were each building our businesses.
What a fascinating story. What do you think is one of the takeaways that you got from being a working artist for that decade or so?
Yeah, when I opened my law firm, uh, we took out an advertisement within the first month, and the advertisement was of a drawing of an old Converse shoe, and it said, "Work with a lawyer who's been where you've been."
Hmm.
And the the truth is that as a photographer, everything that the ASMP members I talk to now deal with, I dealt with as well. So I had people steal my work. I had contracts that were, uh, pretty unconscionable, or people violated them, or, I was underpaid, or someone threatened to sue me. All the bad things that can happen and do happen to photographers regularly. Those are things that I had dealt with on the other side of the table. That also includes things that back then I wasn't well versed in. For example, I didn't know how to start a business, and I didn't know how to form an LLC. I didn't know how to write a contract that would be solid for my clients. And that's where I leaned on ASMP to help me through those times. And now at ASMP, we're able to help photographers in exactly the same way. So, what I gained from that time period was both an understanding of where my strengths were, and an understanding of the issues that all artists face, no matter what medium they work in. Because frankly, all artists, and now I'm going past visual artists, all artists face these same issues. They face copyright issues and business issues, and they also face now rising issues that are brand new, like generative AI and other issues surrounding those type of topics. And so, you know, what what I always looked towards ASMP for was helping me navigate both the things that everyone has dealt with, so I don't make the same mistakes that everyone has made, and the things that are brand new that no one knows how to deal with. And so I think those are two areas that ASMP can really help in.
In regards to areas where a lot of artists, not just photographers, but just artists in general, creatives, where is an area that you see consistently people have vulnerabilities in? Is it in contracting? Is it in business structure? Like, where do you see that most photographers have the most liability?
Yeah, everything you mentioned is a concern, but the biggest concern, and this certainly applied to me and many of the many of my peers, is that most photographers and most creatives in general do not see themselves as business people, do not see the work that they do as a business or a career, or at the very least, they don't frame the way they look at the world through that lens, which makes sense. But it is the difference between being able to have a successful career and having a hobby you very much enjoy is not how skilled you are behind the camera, but how skilled you are on the business side. Because there are, and we know this just from looking at Instagram, there are literally millions of photographers out there, and many of them that you can find within seconds take better pictures than you do. I don't care who you are. There are incredible photographers out in the world. The differentiation is not going to be who takes the best picture. It's going to be who knows the business and legal side of the industry better, which is going to separate you from your peers. And, that was one of those things that I feel like I took away from Brooks was I remember one of my professors saying, you know, the mark of a professional photographer is not going on assignment and always taking the single best image. It's about being able to take very good images on demand repeatedly. That's the difference between a professional and a hobbyist, because everyone has that one great image. But can you do it over and over again? And so, you know, I think that yes, all artists face the same set of very specific issues, copyright and contracts and all the things we're talking about. But the biggest thing that I see in almost every person I talk to is that they undervalue themselves. They undervalue the work they do. They don't feel like they can charge what they need to charge to stay in business because they feel outside pressures. And they feel like they're alone. And I think that's an almost universal feeling for visual artists in particular. So, those are kind of some of the first level issues that we often talk with members about, helping them understand that you're allowed to cross out a line item in a contract. You're allowed to negotiate with a client. It's not just a take it or leave it situation. But it starts with an understanding of your worth as an artist and the importance of the work that you do in the creative community at large.
You mentioned artists feeling alone, and I can resonate to that. And seeing what happens online in regards to a photographer putting a price out there, and then or somebody requests a bid online, and you start to see how it all starts to come down to, I'll do it for free, down to the point that somebody will say, hey, I'll pay you to take the pictures almost. And why do you think that is? Why do you think so many photographers struggle with being able to put value in the work that they do? Because at the end, it undervalues everybody else. And we know that because eventually, if you're charging, let's say, 250 for a session and somebody's saying, I'll do it for 25, the person that's struggling to make ends meet is going to say, yeah, I'm going to go to with the 25. It's in my budget. But why do you feel that there's so many photographers out there that don't see that value? Because they're not going to be able to make ends meet themselves, but still do it anyways.
Yeah. These are, this is a particularly difficult question. And the reason is that to make what we would consider the right decision, you have to look past the momentary circumstance and apply what you're doing with this client to every client that you work with, right? And that is not only hard to do, it's an impossible thing to do if you need money right now to pay your rent at the end of the month. And I don't ever begrudge photographers who have to make choices about how they price their work or what rights they give away when they're working with a client, because life gets in the way of these, ideals that we strive for. That's one thing. And the first thing that I would say to photographers is, look, it's okay if you have undervalued yourself in the past. Don't beat yourself up about it. Everyone has done that. And if you're not able to, in one big jump, move from where you are now to where you want to be, certainly on the pricing side, that's okay too. You have to be this one person shop of understanding your market and your niche in the industry, and understanding, what prices competitors are charging. And if you're going to charge more than that, then you have to be able to talk about the value that you bring, which would warrant the higher prices. That piece of it is something that I think almost every artist and creative can do better at. Because again, I remember very clearly talking to a client very early in my career, and they were hiring me to do an architectural shoot. And what I kept coming back to was, hey, I know how to use this amazing equipment. It is going to be, you're never going to have seen pictures like this. It's amazing. They didn't care about that. They weren't hiring for that. They were talking to 10 photographers that day. And the fact that I was talking about the fact I know how to use a certain lens doesn't matter to anyone but me. And, understanding the things that your clients care about versus the things that you care about is an important first step to helping set the right value in the work that you do.
I like that. I really like that. You brought up something about photographers giving their rights, and this is something that I know that people can easily Google and whatnot. But when it comes time to having releases, or let's say you're doing commercial work, product work, and etc., what is the best way you can explain to someone when somebody wants you to give their rights in perpetuity? How does that differ from other types of releases?
Yeah. So, and you'll have to bear with me for a second as I put on my lawyer hat and talk
I'm
about.
having I'm having you switch from one to the other.
Hey, this is the part of the job that I enjoy, is that being on both sides of these issues. What's important to remember is that if you're in the US as a photographer, the minute that you press the shutter, you own a copyright in the image that you just took. You don't have to do anything, you don't have to tell anyone, you don't have to fill out a form, you don't have to pay a dollar. You own the copyright as soon as it is in a tangible medium on your memory card. Now, there are lots of things you can do after that, like register your work with the US Copyright Office, and we encourage everyone to do that. But you don't have to do that to get your copyright. You own it the minute you take that picture. And so if someone wants to do something with your image that you just took, if someone wants to display it, someone wants to reproduce it on their website, if someone wants to do anything with your image, they have to get your permission. And that permission is what we talk about when we say a license, right? All a license is you giving permission to someone else to use your images in a certain way for a certain time, or in any of those kind of criteria. And that is the core of all of the photography industry, and the way that you have a career is understanding licensing. Because when we talk about photographers giving away their rights, what we're talking about is photographers who are granting permission to their clients to use their images in whatever way the clients want, forever and ever, no matter what comes up, and then charging a lower rate for that. The way that I always, talked about this with my clients and licensing was, look, let's work to make a license that fits within your budget and hits the needs that you're looking for. Do you need images that are going to go on interior pages of your website? I can write you a very specific license, and it's not going to cost you very much. But do you need images that are going to go on the billboard on the interstate that, millions of people are going to see every single day, and you're going to use in worldwide ad campaigns? that license is going to be a little bit different, right? And it's going to cost a lot more. And so a client comes to a photographer and says, look, I just want all the rights to everything. It's the photographer's job to do a little explaining and teaching and saying, here's how licensing works in this industry. And, you know, I totally understand that you want the rights so that you can do whatever you want with the image, but I don't sell my copyright. What I do is I will grant you a license that gives you all this latitude in all these different areas so that you don't have to come back to me and you don't have to worry about the things that you're worried about. But you, as the photographer, retain that underlying copyright. Now, this always begs the question, well, what if a client just says, I just want the copyright to all the images? And here's where I go back to, you're in business. And if a client's willing to pay for that and you feel comfortable doing it, sure, you're a business person. You know, this is these things that we talk about as what photographers should do and shouldn't do are not hard lines that are set in stone. What they are guidelines for many situations. But for example, when I was a photographer, I once did some work for one of the oil and gas companies that's down here in Texas. And they were clear from minute one that I could not put these images in my portfolio. I wasn't allowed to do anything with them. They wanted the copyright to all of them. They're going to use in their annual reports. They're going to use it however they want. They don't have to tell me. And I said, look, I can do that. It's going to cost you X, which was like 5 times as much as I would normally charge. And they said, fine. I I'm in business. That makes sense in that particular situation. What doesn't make sense is your run-of-the-mill client who comes to you and says, well, I need this for my website or this for this ad campaign or this for that. And then you give them a copyright without explaining to them why that is so valuable. Because really, once you transfer that your rights to the images in a copyright or in a very expansive license, you effectively, and in the case of transferring a copyright, legally cease to own that image, which means you can't put it on your website. You can't put it in your portfolio. You know, if you actually transfer a copyright to your client, they own the work, not you. And that's generally a situation that photographers should not enter into unless they've really thought about all the ramifications from that kind of license.
You know, when it comes to licensing, and you mentioned the moment you press the shutter, the copyright, you have it at that point. Now I'm starting to think, I'm like, okay, so in the case of I have a studio and I have a studio assistant, if they take the photo, is the copyright on them or is it on the studio? How does it work?
It's a really astute question and something I think a lot of photographers don't think about. And we see this not only in the studio, we see this with second shooters at weddings and portrait situations. And so here's where we make you, as the photographer, need to understand the legal ramifications of how you run your business. In the US, absent a written agreement that's signed, the person who takes that picture, who presses that shutter, owns the copyright in that image. Whether that's your second shooter, the assistant that you hired for 30 minutes, whoever that is, you in your mind, they're working for you. But unless you have what we call a work for hire agreement or a contract, which is the law says has to be in writing and signed, when they press that shutter, they own the copyright in that image, not you. Which is why you definitely need to have these agreements with anyone who you bring in to work for you. Now, this does not apply to W-2 employees. If it's a W-2 employee that you have in your business, it's presumed under the law in most cases that there's like an inherent work for hire agreement. So the things that they do in the course and scope of their work for you are
Right.
owned by you, not them. But if you bring in an independent contractor as an assistant, you know, you bring in a digitech, you bring in anyone on your team, second shooter, you need to have these written agreements, or else you may find yourself in a situation where you can't give the images you promised to a client because, frankly, you don't own those images. Your second shooter does. And we run into that pretty consistently. But here's the flip side of the coin. Not only do most photographers not know that, most assistants and second shooters don't know that either. And so a lot of times what happens here is that somewhere 5 years down the line, they'll talk to a lawyer about something else and happen to mention this, and the lawyer will say, "Hey, you own all that intellectual property, right? You can put that on your website. You don't even have to ask the photographer." And then they'll say, "Wait, what are you talking about?" And that's where there's some conflict sometimes. So that's a very astute question that goes to the heart of why it's critical that as a photographer you understand how copyright law works in the US and how it works in your industry.
Now, now I'm in this copyright mode, right? I'm thinking we have things like Canva, TikTok, Instagram, all these different platforms where people are either creating content or putting their content and then adding layers depending on what the platform and tool allows them to do. If you utilize these tools, I haven't read the disclaimers. I don't think a lot of people do when you download these apps. If you create something within the app itself, does then that belong to them or does it still belong to you?
Yeah, almost always it still belongs to you.
Okay.
When we're talking about the big social media companies, Facebook and Meta and Instagram, all these different groups, those long terms and conditions that you agree to, w- one part of what they do is they say, "Hey, as part of our business, as Instagram, as part of our business, we display people's images. You, photographer, agree to give a license to us to display your work at Instagram.com. And everyone understands that you're giving that to us for display purposes only, and that you, photographer, retain all the underlying rights to your work." That's generally what most of these end up saying. Now, there's some, you know, a lot sometimes lawyers for these companies will get overzealous and they will slip something in there that causes an uproar. That's a lot of times where ASMP comes in. And so we'll write a letter or we'll give a call to these companies and we'll say, "Hey, you can't say this or that because you're actually taking these rights from the photographer. You're doing this, that you're not really supposed to be doing or allowed to be doing, or you shouldn't be doing, just an organization that relies on content, to make a living." And we have a pretty good track record of getting organizations to back down when those things happen to come through. But I would say, by and large, you know, you see these things floating around on the internet where it says, "By copying and pasting this, I hereby declare that," none of that is real. That none of that matters. Okay. Copyright law says that you own the work until you allow someone else to use it in certain ways, that license that we talked about. And when you're dealing with these social media companies, the license that you're granting is the display right for them to display it on their servers and on their website.
When you were talking earlier about generative AI, that's obviously in a lot of people's minds is not only affecting the creative world, it's impacting every aspect of every business out there. You have regulations such as the European Union AI Act. There's one from California, Denver, South Korea. I mean, everybody, everywhere is tackling some form of regulation with the AI. When it comes to creative work and imagery for photographers and whatnot, what kind of either regulations exist or are hoping to exist that protect not only the photographer but also gives leeway, because there are photographers leveraging AI as well to create content?
It, what you described in the last few sentences is, I think, a lot of what we've been dealing with in the last year or so. And we probably attend, 4 to 5 hours of various meetings with different groups, both national and international groups, every week on AI regulations and the current status of those things. And, you know, you're right that some photographers are relying on AI and are relying on generative AI in certain ways, and that varies from the type of photography you do. You know, some areas like our friends who are photojournalists and over at NPPA, AI is not a part of photojournalism, right? That's against the code of ethics. But for many ASMP members who might work in the commercial or advertising realm, you know, they may work with their clients to storyboard the shots, you know, using AI. There may be some AI generated work and that are components of the final image or the final ad campaign. And so we can't say, you know, uh, all AI is bad, all generative AI is bad. And we don't want to say that because this is not a stick your head in the sand moment. What we can say is that ASMP strongly believes that human created work has significant value and that work that is created with generative AI needs to be disclosed as such. So we're supportive of different groups that work towards those goals and those aims. And to the extent that there's legislation that is talking about, you know, making sure that there are disclosures and disclaimers on work that is using generative AI, we are almost always supportive of those types of actions. But the issues with AI run run pretty deep. And there's kind of two things I want people to think about when they think about generative AI. And the first is something that has already happened and continues to happen, and that's, you know, the use of copyrighted materials for AI model training. This is where, you know, all the AI companies essentially scrape the entire internet to get images to train the original AI models.
Hmm.
And it's a pretty accurate statement to say that if you had images that appeared on the internet in the last 5 years, your work has been used to train AI models. And I have yet to meet a photographer who was asked if that was okay. What we saw in the last few years is pretty unequivocally the largest theft of intellectual property in the history of the world.
Wow.
Is what we view these AI companies as having done, and that's a problem. It remains a problem moving forward, although at least now there's light on this issue. And so one of the things that we talk about at ASMP is introducing clauses into your contracts that talk about AI training and saying very unequivocally in your contract, hey, the work you're hiring me for may not be used for AI training purposes in the future. You know, those are clauses that that we think are good ideas if you're, you know, if that's something that concerns you. The other half of the AI question is the output. So the input is the AI training that we really, you know, are concerned about. The other half is the output. And we already talked about one piece of the output, which is disclosing when generative AI works are used. But the other part of output has to do with copyright. And, you know, we talked about, hey, if you own a copyright in a work, you're the only one who's allowed to reproduce it and display it and make copies of it and all those things, unless you give a license to someone else. But you're the only one who inherently owns those rights. But the Copyright Office has said that works that are created with generative AI tools are not eligible for copyright protection. And we are both supportive and agree with that you know, ruling and an opinion that the Copyright Office has. But that brings up some really concerning issues because interspersed in all of the editing tools that we now use are generative AI features. You know, just think in Adobe Photoshop of generative fill and, you know, expanding, you know, canvases with generative AI and the different options that you have now. And what the Copyright Office says is that if you do that and it makes up more than just a little part of the image, you're supposed to disclose that on your copyright registration. And that part of the work, the finished work, is not eligible for copyright protection. That's a big concern. And I have literally talked for hours recently about, why that's a big concern and all of the detailed nuances of that. But here's what I want to leave, you know, you all with, and that is thinking about the second level to what I just said. If you create a work for a client and you like some of the architectural shoots I was talking about earlier, you use tools in any of the image editing programs that utilize generative AI to, for example, replace the sky. And the sky is a big part of the image. And then you deliver that work to your client. Your client thinks that they have a copyright or a license to that whole image, but they don't. They only can have a license to the part that is eligible for copyright protection, which is the non-generative AI part. And for many ASMP members who work for both small businesses and large businesses, you really need to be disclosing that to your clients, because your clients are not paying you for 50% of an image's copyright. They're paying
Right.
you for the whole image's copyright. And imagine if a client then used that work in advertising and someone else stole it. Someone else stole your client's work that you created, but it was used, generative AI was used in its creation. All of a sudden, you're in a situation where you, as a photographer, might get sued by your client who said, look, I was never told that these are the tools the photographer was using and that those were not eligible for copyright protection. And here's the rub: most photographers are not thinking about this at all. And, you know, whereas when I was a photographer and we used the healing brush and we used the clone stamp tool and we used the other tools in Photoshop, all that was doing was manipulating the pixels that were already in the image to create different parts. Now, when you use some of those same tools, you're creating generative AI works. Those are pixels that never existed before, that are utilizing generative AI models to create that work. And that part of your image is not subject to copyright protection. And this division between owning a copyright in your photograph and then having to step back and say, wait, do I own a copyright in all of the photograph? Is some of the photograph not eligible for copyright protection? How do I navigate this? These are huge issues, and they don't have solutions right now. We talk with the software companies about making sure that their users understand when generative AI tools are kicking in and when they're not. We talk with the Copyright Office about how, while we agree with the premise that entirely generative AI created images should not be eligible for copyright protection, maybe they want to back off on some other areas that make it very hard for working photographers to register works that may contain any generative AI tools, right? And then we talk with photographers about making sure that not only do they understand, but that their clients understand what role generative AI plays in the work that they're creating, because it can make a difference. And I don't want to see any photographer get sued by a client because of a failure to disclose, something about generative AI. The the worst part of all of this is that there's no there's no answer right now to a lot of the things that we just raised. And the downside issues here might not pop up for another 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. And, you know, what is going to change between now and then is everything when it comes to generative AI. And so that's another thing that I think organizations like ASMP do well, is stay on top of these matters. We try to be in the room, both in Washington and elsewhere, when these decisions are being made about, both at the federal level and the state level. And this is a dicey time for photographers, for a whole number of reasons. Um, uh, that, you know, you as a photographer and as a business person and as someone who wants to have a career in the visual industry need to keep on top of.
It's all very critical. It seems that, to your point, AI has been something you've been working on for quite a bit. What do you foresee now that we're halfway through 2025? What's the goal for the rest of the year and the start of the next?
Yeah. Well, Um, our primary goals are often shifting, and that's partly because while we are the second largest trade association for visual creators in the U.S., we are still relatively small compared to, for example, the movie industry or the music industry, or some of these groups that just have significant money to lobby and do advocacy work. Um, and and what that means is that we have to be very selective about the advocacy efforts we do undertake. And so what you will see from ASMP on the AI side is an emphasis on being involved where there are laws related to disclosure of generative AI, like we talked about, labeling, making sure that everyone understands what they're buying. I often liken this to, hey, we can go to the grocery store and we see some bananas that don't have any stickers on them, and then right next to them there's some bananas that say organic and they cost a little bit more. That's labeling that everyone's comfortable with, and everyone understands that you may pay more for something that was created in this way or that way. And so, we support things like disclosure when there's not only generative AI works, but also disclosure when something is a human created work. You may want to use that as a business owner to say, look, I understand that generative AI is out there, but if you hire me, you're always going to get human created works. That's something that you can use as part of your business. That's one area that we really focus on. The other area with respect to generative AI that we often are thinking about is in working with the Copyright Office on all of the ramifications, that some of which I mentioned, and some of which are incredibly arcane and matter, but aren't nearly as exciting as the ones that we talked about. Um, Now, I think it's incumbent upon me to say that just in the last few weeks, there's been significant change at the U.S. Copyright Office. The Register of Copyrights, Shira Perlmutter, was fired by the Trump administration. She then is currently suing the administration because, under most legal standards, she wasn't allowed to be fired as the head of the USCO. What that's done is two things that are relevant to this conversation. One, we had a very good relationship with Register Perlmutter and the Copyright Office, and I was regularly in DC, 3 or 4 or more times a year, meeting with her and meeting with her team, and that was a way that our niche of the industry, photographers, could have a voice in this process that right now is a little up in the air. That's one thing. Two is that currently the office um, is not processing registrations, certainly in the same way that they were before, and depending on various reports, possibly at all at the moment. Now, that's not something that is going to ultimately affect photographers, because no matter what happens, that piece of it will get ironed out. But I raise these 2 points to say that not only are we dealing with all the things that we've talked about for the last hour, but we're also dealing with brand new things that are cropping up every day. Um, uh, Spiro Perlmutter's firing came about 72 hours after the Copyright Office released a long-awaited report about copyright in generative AI. And in that report, the Copyright Office said that it does not believe that using copyrighted works to train AI models is what we call fair use. That's something that ASP strongly believes is true, that that is not fair use, that photographers and their photographs, their copyrighted works, should not be used in that way without proper attribution and compensation. But that report came out, and then Register Perlmutter was fired shortly thereafter. Um, it doesn't take a lot to think about the lines you can draw between the business interests who are on the AI company side, who, if they had to pay every photographer whose works that they had used, would be
Yeah.
a very expensive and difficult task. And had the Copyright Office come out and said they thought it was fair use, it would have been a big win for that side and a big loss for us. And by us, I mean, frankly, all creatives.
Right.
Um, and so there's a lot happening right now. And there's a lot to keep our eyes on. But the things we talked about are some of the most important. I will name one more thing, and that is that one thing we have been hearing about and are concerned about, and we've seen put in writing in a few different laws in different kind of ways that have not yet become law, but we've seen out there, is a clause which says any laws related to regulating AI are preempted by federal law, which means that federal law would overrule any states who have done things. You mentioned California, you mentioned a few others that have already come out with regulations for AI. And we definitely believe that states should have the right to regulate AI for the people who live in those states. And that would be something that would be of great concern were that to pass into law. So, you know, we try to keep an eye on all of this. We have strong partners in groups like the Copyright Alliance, which is one of the strongest copyright voices in DC, that we work very closely with on these issues. And we just really try to focus on the things that will affect photographers not only right now, but next year and 5 years and 10 years from now.
The AI is something that a lot of people, they see, I guess, the front end product of what you can do with AI. And there are so many things happening behind the scenes. I had no idea that if 50% of your work is AI generated, that you only own 50% of that copyright. And to your point, to your credit, I really do feel that most photographers may not even know that themselves and can put themselves in a bind if they're doing client work. And just from lack of awareness and the fact that they don't realize the importance of transparency, what it can do not only to safeguard themselves, but safeguard the client in the future as well. So it's the tip of the iceberg when it comes to AI. And for the ASMP members or anybody considering to join, what are some of the best ways they can maximize their membership?
Yeah. Well, first, I believe that we're providing all of your listeners with an exclusive code that will give them a discount if they're new members, and so we definitely would love everyone to be a member. And I'll get on my soapbox for a minute and say, you know, when we talk about going to Washington and going into congressional offices, when I'm able to sit there and say we represent 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 creatives, that makes a difference. The larger those numbers are, the more power we have as an industry, and the more ability we have to affect change. And so we definitely would love everyone to be a member. There's strong value not only for you, but for the industry as a whole. But then once you're a member, there's a lot of ways that you can get immediate benefit, and I'll just name a few. One is the ASMP Academy powered by Sony. This is an area of our website that has hundreds of hours of video, both from ASMP National and our chapters. We have 38 chapters across the country, with programming that we have done and they have done that all members can access and view. And that is probably the first place that I think new members should go. As part of the Academy, there's also what we call our document library. And I think there's 27 different custom documents there that are templates that I've drafted, I think all of them now. And these are documents that when I was an attorney, we would charge thousands of dollars for if you came in to buy them. And they're there for every member to download and modify and use. And so that's a great benefit in and of itself. And then finally, I would say to take a very close look at the member benefit hub. And this is where we work with companies through our corporate member program and other programs. And I will say that Outspoken Artist has been a supporter of ASMP, and we incredibly appreciate that. Part of the reason that's important is because we're able to, one, provide benefits to our members that they might not be able to get elsewhere. And these are things, everything from, you know, discounts at camera stores or on certain products or different pro level support, or all the things that you might imagine. But it also includes things like travel discounts and rental car discounts, and those are can be of great benefit to our members. uh, that is something that ASMP has focused a lot on in the last few years. We, in the last 2 years, have brought on someone who you mentioned earlier, Melanie Porter. Melanie comes from the photography industry for many, many, many years, and she's now ASMP's Chief Operating Officer. And in that role, Melanie works with the entire industry as well as all of our members and all of our chapters. And what she's been able to do for ASMP is connect us with so many different opportunities for members to benefit from these companies that are supportive of ASMP and supportive of its mission. I think that that work has been immeasurably valuable for the members. I'll say one last thing as a benefit, and this is something that I think ASMP members have the inside edge on, and that's our media badges. As a member of ASMP, you're eligible to purchase a media badge, which indicates that you are an ASMP member in good standing, as your picture, and it says media on the side, and all these various things. Now, these are not get into events for free, type things. Those don't exist out in the world. You have to work with specific venues and events on those type of things. But what we do know is that for most domestic airlines, by showing them your media badge, you'll often get baggage fees waived. You will often be able to bring more baggage and gear than you might have been able to otherwise by having an ASMP media badge. And no matter what level of ASMP member you are, you can get one of these badges and it will have your membership level on there. This is something that we consistently hear from our members is one of the best benefits to being a member. So there's just a few places to start.
That last benefit itself, I think, is what got me into the ASMP, and then it was
Oh,
it was just down afterwards. I started looking into all the different benefits and was actually quite impressed. But I mean, it has saved me so much money in terms of baggage fees, because whether it waives the fees or if you're flying, I think it's Delta or American Airlines, it's only $50, but I can carry up to almost 80 pounds of gear, which is, I mean, that's pretty cheap compared to the alternative. And
it,
why not?
it is, and it goes to that core, philosophy of ASMP, which is what we want to do is help you run your business and do your photography in as frictionless a way as possible. We don't want you to have to worry about, adding baggage fees onto an already expensive trip, when you're just trying to go out there and do your work. And so I think you'll see that as a constant thread through what we do, which is what we try to do is help you do what you love to do the best. And any resources or support we can provide in that area, we try to offer for you.
It's probably just me, but I actually just like the feeling of checking in media gear. I feel like I'm a one man crew, but at that moment I feel like I'm part of a production. But that's just me, Tom.
Hey, you know what? That goes back to mindset. And we talked about how photographers, are often feel alone, and that's because photographers are often alone. Still photographers in particular. When you're a videographer or filmmaker, you do have a crew of 5 or 10 or 20 or 100, and people who are in the trenches with you. But as a photographer, you're often alone. It's just you, and that is a different feeling and a different mindset. And so understanding that you're part of an organization like ASMP, and ASMP has your back on a number of issues, hopefully makes you feel a little more comfortable going out in the world and running your business. So
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious. I know we focused a lot on the legal side, copyright, etc. We talked about your history in terms of being an artist. Do you do any passion projects in terms of your artistic side, or are you too busy focusing with all the bananas that's happening within the photography and the creative industry?
Well, I was thinking about this just the other week when we were in Tucson for the NAMPA summit, and NAMPA is the North American Nature Photography Association. This is a group that ASMP for the last few years has had the privilege of coordinating their membership and their events, and all NAMPA members are ASMP members, and they all get to share the same benefits. But when I was a photographer, as I mentioned, I was an editorial photographer, but the specific things that I did were nature and wildlife focused. So I would go up to Alaska for 4 months and take pictures of bears and icebergs and glaciers and things. And then those were the works that I sold to magazines and in my gallery and whatnot. And being at the Nampa Summit, uh, uh, reminded me and reignited some of those passions. We had some of the best nature photographers in the world there for the week, including Art Wolf and Franz Lonting and Brian Scarry from National Geographic and Tui DeRoy, who does incredible work in the Galapagos Islands, and William Neal, who is one of the preeminent photographers of the Yosemite area in California. And being able to spend that time with these icons and these legends reminded me of two things. One, how much I enjoy that particular part of photography, and it was certainly inspiring. And two, how thankful I am that there are organizations, whether or not I'm involved in ASMP, like ASMP, who can bring these things together and bring hundreds of photographers together with some of these giants in the field, sit there and talk about photography for a week. It was a pretty incredible experience, and certainly did reignite some passions as well. I don't have a ton of time, but it definitely was an inspiring few weeks.
I find it fascinating how usually you would think that all these photographers being in one place, most would think, oh, the competition and this and that. I've also found myself inspired and motivated to create work when I'm surrounded by other creatives. I guess that's what happens when, to your point, we tend to be alone. Yet, when we're around other creatives and we see them creating work or talking about their work or their inspiration, it just naturally ignites that desire to kind of get back into the reins and create content again, because we get too caught up with the business side of things, which needs to be taken care of. But I just find it fascinating. And it sounds like you had a similar experience too.
Yeah, I think that's again a really important realization, because photographers and I think it is a function of often working as a solo operation, often do get a little nervous and a little wary of competition from other individual photographers. But what we always try to talk about with our members is, look, what is good for the person down the street is also good for you. And what's good for the industry is good for you. And the way that you need to approach, your business and photography in general is by understanding that no matter what type of photography you do, whether it's nature or advertising or portraits or weddings or architecture, whatever it is that you do, there's so much more that connects photographers who are in all those different disciplines from everyone else in the whole world, even other artists. And you should be doing everything you can to connect with photographers in that way, who are both inside your discipline and outside of it, because you all are facing the same battles. And there's a reason that at ASMP we do these large advocacy efforts, nationwide advocacy efforts. And one of the recent ones we just worked on was what's known as the Film Act, which talks about permitting in national parks. This affects our NAMPA members, obviously, but it also affects a lot of wedding photographers who go to national parks for bridal shoots and engagement shoots. And some of them were being forced to get these commercial use authorization permits that cost hundreds of dollars and sometimes a lot more. And if you didn't, you could be jailed in the future. That's what
Wow.
some of these laws said. And so we were up on Capitol Hill with our friends over at PPA and others, to advocate for all photographers, and that's the role that ASMP plays, is to benefit not only our members but the industry at large.
It's really helpful, especially for those that are just trying to just run their studio, have their clients come in and out, and all this work behind the behind the scenes, whether it's the ASMP, the PPA, any other organization. It's it's definitely a lot. It's a lot that goes unheard, and I really appreciate everything you guys do.
Oh,
I'm curious.
thank you. Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm curious since you've probably have either heard or seen or read a good book, a great podcast, or a video that has had a bit of a lasting impact on you. What would you recommend anybody listening or watching to check out?
Yeah. There are definitely a few, and uh, I'm I'm going to see if I can put on my best lawyer hat and quickly talk about other things while I remember the names of them. But there's two books. One is by a guy named David Newhoff, Newhoff, and David and his partner Steve Tepp are the founders of an organization called Rights Click, which is actually a corporate member over at ASMP, and they do a lot of work with copyright issues. But David wrote a book about the preeminent legal case that established the rights of photographs to be eligible for copyright protection. And it was I will make sure that I get you the name of the book. But if you look up David Newhoff copyright, you will immediately find that book. That book is important not only from a historical standpoint and a legal standpoint, but it was in 1893 in this case of the Burrow versus Throne Giles case that gave the rights of photographs to have copyrights at all. And the photograph at issue was a photograph of Oscar Wilde. And David's book goes into the details on this case. And so, if you enjoy that kind of historical nuance into something which we still deal with today, everything that we talked about today comes from that particular court case and that particular issue. That's definitely a book that I would recommend.
I'll definitely put it in the description for anybody who's interested and put it on the screen, etc. And that's great. Actually, funny enough, I think I know somebody who would probably like that book if he hasn't read it already. That'll be John Gress. He's the one that told me about this World War II historian video that he saw on YouTube that was like 4 hours long. And I'm like, you know what? I think that he would be the kind of person that would probably listen to this because
Yeah.
he does a lot of commercial work. He does so much
Yeah.
commercial work. And if he hasn't read it already, I'll definitely reach out to him and let him know because I think he'll love that book. And let's see, one last thing before we go, what would be one piece of advice that you would give photographers with the vantage point that you have?
Uh, you know, I think that photographers need to understand that no matter what type of work they do, the single most valuable asset any photographer has are the rights to their images. That's what allows you to display your own work and find new clients by putting it on your website or on Instagram or in your portfolio. And 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 also understanding that these rights are um, always under attack, and you need to fight to make sure that they remain something that's valuable to you. Because the whole point of copyright, the whole point of copyright in a very philosophical standpoint is that I, as a creative person, need to be able to have a period of time where I can benefit from the creative work that I make, and others can't take it from me and also benefit at that particular time. Imagine I wrote a book today, and I finished it, and I put it on sale. When I woke up in the morning, someone had bought a copy of my book and then copied it themselves and are now selling it right next to mine. I couldn't stay in business. And if you think about copyright as the only mechanism that allows creative businesses to exist, That's what we're talking about. That photography as a career and as an industry exists is because of the fact that photographers can make a living doing it. And copyright is what allows that to occur. So when you see things in the news about copyright, whether it's on the music side, which is we often see, or in writing, or with our friends over at the Authors Guild, or anything, it's important to realize that this area of law is what underpins the whole creative economy of the US and the world. And so it makes a difference. I absolutely understand if all of your viewers and listeners are not interested in knowing every in and out of that, but you don't have to. That's our job, and we're happy to do that for you because we think it's so vitally important for the industry and for the world.
No, that's great advice, really great advice. And Tom, before I forget, what is the best way people can check out the ASMP? I know I'll be giving them a code, but where can they check out more information on the ASMP? And if they need to reach out to anybody with questions, what's the best
Yeah,
approach?
best way is right at asmp.org. You can go there, and at the bottom of the page, you'll see a place you can contact us if you have any questions. You can we have a phone number there. You can reach out to info@asmp.org. But any communication is through the website will get to us. And if you are in an area where we have one of our 38 chapters, we can also connect you. The minute you become a member, you also are eligible to go to those chapter events and work with those groups as well. That's a wonderful way to network and connect with other photographers in your area. And we have some vibrant and exciting chapters around the country. So take a look at asmp.org. That's where you'll get started, and then everything comes from there.
Well, Tom, I really appreciate you taking the time, especially today being Memorial Day, and joining me on the show. And I think that's all that I have. Did you have any questions for me, Tom?
You know, no questions except to say thank you for having me out, and thank you for providing this this podcast and this service to creatives and photographers. I think it's incredibly important that photographers stay connected and stay knowledgeable in all of these areas. And I've enjoyed getting to know you, and thank you for inviting me out today.
Same here. Tom, I'm sure we'll be in touch, and I'll probably see you, if not this year, it'll be probably next year. I'm 100% certain on that. All right,
That
Tom,
sounds wonderful. Thank
have
you
a
so
wonderful day.
much.
Thank you.